Okay, so it's finally the big lecture you have all been waiting for. We will now discuss the organelles of eukaryotic cells. You know there are 5 parts every cell has. Well, here are the other pieces. An organelle is a tiny organ. It's a specialized part of a cell that performs a specific function. Think about the organs in your body, such as the heart, performing the function of moving blood. Cells have organelles, or tiny organs, which perform specialized functions for them. Now, the first type of cell that I want to cover is the animal cell. Animal cells are the type of cells that make up every part of our body. Our entire body is made of animal cells. Animal cells, like all other cells, have a cell membrane. Now, a cell membrane is composed of what's called a phospholipid bilayer. I do not want you to worry about this too much during this chapter. We'll go into a lot more detail later. But a phospholipid bilayer means this. Bi means two, so it's a layer made of 2 parts, or a 2-layer membrane. And each of these layers is phospholipids. Phospholipids have a hydrophobic or water-fearing area and a hydrophilic or water-loving area. The way this works is the hydrophilic or water-loving areas of the molecule turn, so they're facing the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell where water is common. This creates a watertight barrier, and the cell membrane is then able to control what enters and leaves the cell. So the function of the cell membrane is to control what enters and leaves the cell. And we'll go into a lot more detail on this a little bit later in the semester. Now, within the cell membrane, this is something else every cell must have, you have that fluid, that cytoplasm. Remember, the cytoplasm is not just a pointless bunch of goo. It does support the cell organelles, and it is the location that everything rests in, but it is also a very important site for chemical reactions, and its unique chemical properties are important to it. Now, all cells must have genetic information, but in eukaryotic cells, the genetic information is separated from the rest of the cell in the cytoplasm. This is done by placing it in a nucleus. Now, a nucleus is a membrane-bound organelle that has the genetic information inside of it. And what I am drawing now is the nucleus. The brown represents the nuclear envelope. The blue represents the inside of the nucleus. I'll sort of cut it open for this illustration. So you have your nuclear envelope. This controls what leaves the nucleus of the cell. The DNA does not ever leave the nucleus, but RNA, which is a small fragment copy of the DNA, will leave the nucleus to go out and produce proteins. It leaves by exiting through nuclear pores. The nuclear pores are small openings in the nuclear envelope. Now, within the nucleus, and let me just label that very quickly. This whole thing is called the nucleus. The nucleus may also be called the brain of the cell. You may have heard it called that. That is because the DNA which it contains controls all cell functions because it controls what proteins a cell produces, and that controls what the cell does. So the nucleus doesn't make a conscious decision, but it does contain the DNA which controls cell functions. Now, the DNA here is not alone, so instead of just calling it DNA, we call it chromatin. And chromatin is a combination of DNA and proteins which are called histones. Histones are proteins which DNA wraps around to keep from getting tangled. And in the chromatin you will also find RNA. Now, if you look, I'm going to circle this darkened region. I should have chosen a different color. But I'm going to circle this darkened region of the chromatin. This region is called your nucleolus. The nucleolus is responsible for producing a ribosome. And we'll discuss ribosomes in just a moment, but the nucleolus is actually a region of the chromatin which is responsible for ribosomal RNA or rRNA production. Now, coming off of the nuclear envelope, you have a series of flattened sac things that look sort of like a maze that wind through the cell. This flattened sac-like structure is called an endoplasmic reticulum. And yes, I know that's a horribly bizarre word. You can call it an ER, but make sure you recognize the words endoplasmic reticulum. Now, the endoplasmic reticulum is responsible for a lot of the modifications that occur to proteins. It also helps move some materials around the cell, and it actually produces an organelle, and we'll discuss that in a moment. As I mentioned, you can shorthand endoplasmic reticulum as the ER. Now, the endoplasmic reticulum comes in two different varieties. One, the rough ER, is studded with little black dots, which are ribosomes. Now, ribosomes are an organelle which is responsible for protein production. Information comes out of the nucleus, leaving through the nuclear pores. It goes to the ribosomes, and the ribosomes assemble proteins. Ribosomes may be found on the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and that's how it gets its name, because it is bumpy, because it is covered in ribosomes. Or ribosomes may be free-floating in the cytoplasm. Remember, ribosomes are responsible for protein production, and the chromatin and DNA controls this. You also have your smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Oh, and I'm sorry, rough endoplasmic reticulum functions by modifying and producing proteins. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum is a little bit different. It does function also in synthesizing products, but it synthesizes lipids, makes peroxisomes, and makes membrane components. Now you'll see me drawing this series of sacs here that sort of resembles a bunch of bananas. This bizarre looking thing, and these are little vesicles, which I'll discuss in a minute. This bizarre looking shape is called a Golgi body or a Golgi apparatus. The Golgi body is sort of like the UPS, the packaging plant for the cell. It takes materials from the cell and places them in vesicles, those little circles you see coming off of it. And these can then move around the cell as needed. Now, the Golgi body and the rough endoplasmic reticulum actually unite to produce our next organelle. This next organelle contains digestive enzymes, and these enzymes are proteins. All enzymes are a type of protein. These are produced in the endoplasmic reticulum. And that's that little lime green thing you see. Once the enzymes are produced, they are placed into a little vesicle, a little membrane sac that buds off of the endoplasmic reticulum and goes into the cytoplasm. And this is carrying our enzyme. This enzyme in its vesicle then travels all the way to the Golgi body. Now, the membrane is essentially the same, is made essentially the same way for both the endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi body. So this little vesicle membrane bonds to the membrane of your Golgi body. The enzymes released into the Golgi body, where it's modified a little bit. That's why I'm adding the orange dots. Then a new vesicle-type shape will pinch off from the end of the Golgi body, and it will contain this newly modified enzyme. This then pinches off completely from the Golgi body, and this becomes an organelle called a lysosome. The lysosome contains the enzymes that were created in the endoplasmic reticulum and then modified and packaged in the Golgi body. And the responsibility of a lysosome is to break down unwanted material within the cell. This could be a bacteria the cell takes in that needs to be destroyed. This could be an organelle that is old and non-functioning. And lysosomes can actually, there are many in an animal cell, they can actually all break open at once and create what's called programmed cell death or apoptosis, which destroys the cell by digesting it from the inside out with its own material. Now, to make sure I'm absolutely clear about this, a lysosome is found only in animal cells. These are not found in plant cells. They are made with two membranes. They contain digestive enzymes that are produced in the rough endoplasmic reticulum and are repackaged by the Golgi body. These are used to break down unwanted materials in an animal cell only. Now, to move on to another organelle, this one is also produced in the endoplasmic reticulum, but this one is produced in a smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Remember, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum can produce lipids and peroxisomes. This is your peroxisome. It produces the material that goes into the peroxisome. It produces the enzyme. This is then pinched off into a vesicle, and this vesicle becomes your peroxisome. And peroxisomes are responsible for the breakdown or decomposition of toxins within a cell. These are very common in your liver cells. They are very important in breaking down toxins, which you know are processed in your liver cells. These are found in both plant and animal cells. Again, they are produced by the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Now, I want to go on to one of the most important organelles that you will run across, or certainly I feel it's very important. This organelle, the mitochondria, is the site of cellular respiration. Now, cells do not have lungs, they do not breathe, but it is the place where energy is produced. It is also called the powerhouse of the cell because it produces energy. And no, do not write powerhouse on a test. It is the mitochondria. Use powerhouse to help you remember it. The mitochondria is found in both plant and animal cells, and it has some internal structures. The basic shape is somewhat pill-like, and if you cut this pill-like shape open, as I have in this diagram, you will see that there is an internal area, and this internal area is called the matrix. You can think of the red and blue pill in the matrix. And then inside of this matrix is a folded membrane. And the folds of the membrane are called the cristae. As I mentioned before, the mitochondria is the site of cellular respiration, and different parts of respiration take place in the different areas of the mitochondria. We will discuss what occurs in each of these areas later on in the semester. For right now, know that the mitochondria produces energy, produces ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate, and we'll discuss that next week. Know that the mitochondria produces ATP, and that it is made of a folded up membrane called cristae, which is within a matrix. Now, there is another organelle that I want to mention that is found only in the animal cells. This organelle is actually made up of two parts, and they are found near the nucleus. This organelle is called a centrosome, and each of its parts is called a centriole. Two centrioles makes up a single centrosome, and the responsibility of this within the animal cell is to help organize cell division. It actually helps get the cell's skeleton ready and organized. Now, I know you're thinking, what cell skeleton? They don't have bones, and you're absolutely right. Cyto means cell, so a cytoskeleton is going to be very important, though, to a cell, and I want to add that in now. There are three different sizes of material that make up the cytoskeleton. The finest of these, and let me just sketch that in here, the finest part of the cytoskeleton is called the microfilament. And you can picture this like a little thread in the cell. The microfilament is also called actin, and it is responsible for the cell's movement. It allows the cell to stretch and compress, and it also helps anchor the cell to other cells. The next size fiber is intermediate in size, and it is called the intermediate filament. Now, the intermediate filament, again, is somewhat like a thread or a rope. It's these twisted together pieces of protein, and they help the cell to maintain its shape. This is the intermediate filament. It also helps anchor cells. So both microfilaments and intermediate filaments help anchor cells. The last and largest of the cytoskeleton structures is called the microtubule. Now, the microtubule is the one that works with the centrosomes or centrioles during cell division. Its name actually means tiny tubes, Micro is tiny and tubules means tubes, and they are hollow in the middle. It's like a little spiral of material, and it's hollow in the middle. This is the thickest type of cytoskeleton. It aids in cell division, and it physically helps move the organelles and chromosomes. Now we'll move on to our plant cells. Plant cells have a lot of similar features to animal cells. However, there are some very important differences that I really want you to pay attention to. First of all, they do have a cell membrane. They're cells. This is a given. Within the cell membrane, you will again have a nucleus. These are eukaryotic cells. All eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. The nucleus is made of a nuclear membrane, studded with nuclear pores, which allow information to leave the nucleus. Inside the nucleus, you will have your chromatin, your DNA, all your genetic information is in there. You'll have that little dense area, your nucleolus. And this all makes up, again, your nucleus. These are terms you should know. This is found in both animals and plant cells. These will not appear in prokaryotic cells. So your nucleus, one more time, is made up of a nuclear envelope. The nuclear envelopes have small openings in it called nuclear pores. The nuclear envelope separates the genetic material from the cytoplasm of the cell. The nuclear pores allow RNA to leave the cell and ribosomal pieces. The chromatin is made up of DNA and proteins called histones and RNA. And the nucleolus is a portion of the chromatin which produces ribosomes. Now, remember, coming off of the cell membrane is a folded membrane sac, which is called the endoplasmic reticulum. The rough endoplasmic reticulum is studded with ribosomes, and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum does not have ribosomes. The rough endoplasmic reticulum is usually found closest to the nucleus, which makes sense since ribosomes are produced within the nucleolus inside the nucleus. So you have your rough endoplasmic reticulum, or your rough ER. You'll have your smooth ER located further away from the nucleus. Remember, it performs a little bit different function than the rough ER. Make sure you're clear on those. We have ribosomes that are found not only in the endoplasmic reticulum, but spread out within the cell. Remember, ribosomes function to synthesize or produce proteins. They take directions from the DNA sent out by RNA, and they produce proteins. Now, before I forget, we do need some cytoplasm in this cell. Cytoplasm is found in all cells, both eukaryotic and prokaryotic. It supports the organelles. It helps actually move things around the cells a little bit, and it's the site of many important chemical reactions. That is your cytoplasm. In addition to your endoplasmic reticulum, you have another membrane sac sort of organelle that is organized into little stacks or groupings, and this is called your Golgi body. Now, in the animal cells, the Golgi body and endoplasmic reticulum work together to produce lysosomes. You will not find lysosomes in the plant cells. They do not have them. Digestion is taken care of by another organ. Remember, Golgi bodies can produce vesicles, which are found in both animal cells and plant cells, just these little membrane-bound transport devices. Think of it as your UPS truck driving out. Both animal cells and plant cells have mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of the cells. This is where ATP is produced. Remember that mitochondria have those substructures inside the folded membrane called the cristae, and that space around the folded membrane called the matrix. This is the mitochondria. It provides energy for the cell. It's the mighty mitochondria. We then have organelles that are produced with a smooth endoplasmic reticulum. We discussed this earlier in the animal cells. These are found in both animal and plant cells, and they're called peroxisomes. Remember, they break down toxic material. Peroxisomes. Now, we're going to move on to some organelles that are found only in plant cells. And one of the major ones, which is very large, is called a central vacuole. And this is actually why I drew all of our organelles off to the right-hand side when I was drawing the plant cell. The central vacuole is very large. It can be up to 90% of the volume of the cell. It is filled with water and enzymes. It stores water for plant cells, which helps contribute to their rigidity and their shape, and it controls the turgor pressure or water pressure within the cell. The central vacuole can actually release water, and if there's not enough water in it, that's when you'll see your plants wilt. It's because their cells don't have enough pressure in their central vacuoles. There are also digestive enzymes in the central vacuole, which helps break down material in the cell, much like the lysosomes do in plant cells. Now, I forgot to write down cytoskeleton over here on the right-hand side. This is found in both animal cells and plant cells. Don't forget those three different types: the microfilaments, the intermediate filaments, and the microtubules. However, there will be no centrioles or centrosomes here for the microtubules to work with. They'll operate on their own. Now, the most famous organelle found only in plant cells I'm drawing now is green, and it is the organelle responsible for making plant cells green. This little green organelle is called a chloroplast. The chloroplast is very important in plant cells. It is what allows them to produce their own food and lets plants be autotrophs, or self-feeding. Auto means self, troph means to feed. They're self-feeding. They take the energy from the sun and convert it into food, which our cells, animal cells, cannot do. We'll get into the fine details of this when we discuss photosynthesis, but for right now, I want you to focus on how a chloroplast, or what a chloroplast does, and just the basic little substructures you'll find on a chloroplast. A chloroplast is made up of flattened sacs on the inside surrounded by a membrane. These flattened sacs are found in stacks. It's like a stack of plates, and I feel like Dr. Seuss right now. But they'll be found in stacks. Each individual sac is called a thylakoid, and the stacks are called grana. And each of these has an important role to play in photosynthesis. Let me show you one more version of this so you can have one more look at the chloroplast. It is typically like consists of an oval shape. Within it is the stroma, and inside the stroma are the sacs. There's an individual sac that's a thylakoid. The sacs occur in stacks, which are called the grana. Make sure you're comfortable with this and familiar with it. As I said, we'll discuss photosynthesis and where it occurs later next week. Now, back to our plant cell. It has another organelle which is not unique to plant cells but not found within animal cells, and this is called the cell wall. You heard me mention this when I was talking about prokaryotic cells, and it can be formed by peptidoglycogen. The cell wall of plant cells, however, is formed by a much easier word to get out: cellulose. And this is what makes some plants so difficult for us to break down are the cell walls. And the cell wall provides structure and support and a level of protection for plant cells. Now, on this list, there are 3 organelles that are unique to plant cells. They are found in plant cells only. These are the cell wall, the central vacuole, and the chloroplast. The organelles that are found in both animals and plant cells are much more numerous and are found on the right-hand side of this list. The organelles that are found in both include the chromatin, nucleus, nucleolus, nuclear envelope, nuclear pore, rough ER, smooth ER, the peroxisomes, the ribosomes, the Golgi body, the cytoskeleton, all 3 types of it, and also the mitochondria, and the cytoplasm. Please don't forget the cytoplasm. And apparently I decided not to label the cell membrane in this diagram. And yes, it is an organelle, and it is found in both plant cells, in animal cells, and in prokaryotic cells. This is a list you should be very familiar with. So now, the last thing I want to do is summarize all the information we've covered, so bear with me for just one more run through. Here is a list of what you should know. You should know each of these organelles, be able to recognize them visually as well as by a description of their function. You should also know the type of cell they're found in. You know the nucleus is made up of the nuclear envelope. The nuclear envelope has nuclear pores. Within this nucleus is your chromatin. The chromatin has a dense region called a nucleolus, which helps produce the rRNA, which makes ribosomes. So your nucleolus makes the ribosomes. Ribosomes then leave the nucleus with the nuclear pore. They may embed themselves in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, where they make proteins. The rough endoplasmic reticulum can then send these proteins out. They can go to the Golgi Body, where they're repackaged, and some of these can become lysosomes. There's also the smooth ER, and it produces peroxisomes as well as lipids. You also have vesicles. Remember, these are membrane-bound little vehicles, sort of, that move things around the cell. You'll need to know that central vacuoles are found only in plant cells. Sorry, I forgot to mention lysosomes are found only in animal cells. The central vacuole holds water, controls the turgor pressure, helps the cell maintain its shape, and it also helps digest material in plant cells. You have mitochondria, which produce the energy, or ATP, for cells. You also have your chloroplast, These are found only in plant cells. The chloroplast produce the energy, or produce food for plant cells. They go through photosynthesis and produce sugar, glucose. You also have your cytoplasm. This is found in both cells, as is your cytoskeleton, or all three parts, the microfilament, the intermediate filament, and the microtubules. Microfilaments are also called actin and help the cell act or move around. Intermediate filaments give cells their shape, and microtubules are responsible for helping organize cell division. In animal cells only, you will also have your centrosomes, which are made of two centrioles that use microtubules to help organize cell division. And in all cells, you'll have a cell membrane. Remember that phospholipid bilayer, and the cell membrane controls what enters and leaves the cell. And you will have a cell wall in your plant cells, not your animal cells, which provides structure and support and is composed of cellulose. As always, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask me. Please make use of your forums here online. Post questions, let me answer them. And as always, have a lovely day.